weapons and fatally shot the suspect. Investigators say that they believe the suspect was the only person who fired shots, and the motive remains under investigation. Multiple crime scenes connected to the case. Officials say some of the children were related to the suspect of this crime.
President Trump says the U.S. military shot into and seized an Iranian ship Sunday that tried to bypass its blockade of the Gulf of Oman. He says Vice President J.D. Vance will attend negotiations in Pakistan on Tuesday, but conflicted information is coming from Iranian state media. State Department spokesman Tommy Pickett says President Trump has always wanted a peaceful solution, but the nuclear threat required him to respond in force.
He's speaking to this how he wants to see a deal. He wanted to see a deal before Operation Midnight Hammer. He wanted to see a deal after Operation Midnight Hammer. He continues to want to see a deal, but he is going to see his objectives completed here. The fundamental one of which is that the Iranian regime can never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon.
One thing Americans know for certain, this has caused oil prices and, as a result, gas prices to skyrocket. People want to know when the price of gas will come down, but Energy Secretary Chris Wright isn't offering much comfort in the near future.
That could happen later this year. That might not happen till next year. But prices have likely peaked, and they'll start going down. Certainly with a resolution of this conflict, you'll see prices go down. Under $3 a gallon is pretty tremendous in an inflation-adjusted terms. We had that in the Trump administration, but we hadn't seen that in inflation-adjusted terms for quite a long time. We'll get back there for sure.
Virginia's leaders are charging forward with a constitutional amendment to redraw the state's electoral districts in favor of Democrats. The people will vote on the proposal, and if passed, it'll transfer redistricting authority from the current bipartisan commission to the state legislature, which is controlled by Democrats. Virginia Congressman Ben Cline says voters want to keep the process the way it is.
They're trying to amend the Constitution to undo what voters put in the Constitution 5 years ago when we established nonpartisan redistricting. We got the maps that the voters demanded. We have communities of interest.
The federal lawsuit accuses an East Texas city of firing a library director over political pressure.
KETK and other outlets report that in the lawsuit, former librarian Ashley Taylor says she was retaliated against for protected speech and targeted by false attacks from an outside advocacy group. She argues City of Tyler officials violated her First Amendment rights and allowed Grassroots America, We the People, to interfere with her employment through what she describes as defamatory public campaigns. Taylor claims she was retaliated against for a sign an employee posted that read, "A truly great library has something in it to offend everyone." CBS 19 reports Taylor was fired due to discussing without proper authorization a third-party investigation into the sign. Kristen Bentley, a state Republican executive committee member, said that the issue began with parents in 2022 but was brought to the forefront due to a Tyler mayoral election.
There was a group that basically found some really explicit, inappropriate books in the children's section of the public library. And when we talk about sexually explicit, we don't mean that in these books that there is something sexual that is being implied. We are talking about graphic, leaving nothing to your imagination.
She said Grassroots America was working behind the scenes with the city initially to get them to call a meeting for public testimony, but that didn't happen.
They weren't ever asking to remove books entirely. The main thing they were asking for is that it just get moved to the appropriate sections.
She said the books eventually got moved out of the children's section. I'm Robert Thornton.
For American Family News, I'm Steve Pugh.
AFA Action takes attacks on the family seriously. The enemies of the family constantly employ new tactics to try to sneak past our radar. They know if we stand together, their evil plans will fail. Your gift to AFA Action allows us to stay vigilant against their onslaught. And if you give this month, you'll receive access to the Cultural Institute video When Your Faith is Illegal by Frank Harbor on AFA Stream as our thanks. You can make your gift today at afaaction.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is
Monday, April 20th, and starting with a very bizarre story that has gotten national attention, including an investigation now ordered by President Donald Trump, and this coming from the New York Post, a string of missing or dead scientists, quote unquote, too coincidental not to be a major concern, a congressman is alleging. And so the deaths or disappearances of 11 top United States scientists and researchers is a matter of national urgent importance, a member of the House Oversight Committee insisted on Friday. So Representative Eric Burleson, I think is how he pronounces his name, a Republican from Missouri, said his office had already been eyeing some of the too coincidental disappearances a year before President Trump told reporters on Thursday that he ordered an investigation. So the lawmaker argued that the fate of the scientists almost certainly is linked to the access that some of them had to classified aerospace, defense, and UFO information, and may involve bad actors from China, Russia, or Iran. And Fox News goes on to say that 4 of those are tied to LA County. Whether or not that's significant remains to be seen in the investigation. And so the White House and the FBI have launched a holistic review into the 11 scientists tied to sensitive aerospace and nuclear research who have died or vanished since only 2024. So the 4 notable cases that are tied to LA County include 3 JPL experts. That's, of course, NASA's project, the JPL project. And despite a 2025 search, no trace has been found of one of those scientists, and officials have not confirmed yet a connection between the 11 nationwide cases. But it's very weird. The series and the circumstances of the deaths are just total disappearances among these scientists, all with high-level security clearances. And so the investigation is now ongoing. So let's welcome in Gerard Filitti, who is an attorney at the Lawfare Project. And, you know, Gerard, I mean, not every correlation equals causation. I mean, we all know that. But at the same time, it's very weird that in a very short amount of time, 11 top scientists that all have the same type of background now have died or have gone missing. I would think that it would be very weird if, 11, for example, members of Congress or people who were tied, to Congress in Washington, D.C., went missing since 2024. I mean, that's a very small select group as well. We're not talking just about 11 Americans or something that is, a wide enough population that 11 is an insignificant number. So what do you make of this?
Well, I think the headline speaks for itself, and what it says is that we as a people have a concern that there are things going on behind the scenes, foreign nations potentially being involved, monitoring our secrets, potentially capturing or trying to obtain information from people who work in sensitive fields, or that something else is amiss when we have this many people who have allegedly high-profile, high-position jobs go missing or are found dead. I think that the headlines, though, also are written in such a way as to kind of lead to the story itself. Because when you look at numbers, and I look at this statistically, there are over 1 million people who work in the similar field as these disappeared people, these 11 missing people. And if you look at just statistically how many people die in the United States a year, you'd probably expect for their age cohort for there to be about 722 deaths per that 1 million people. So 11 disappearing on its own is not that huge of a number. So what we really need to look at, and what I think the authorities will closely look at, is whether the work that they were engaged in was related rather than the fields that they were in.
Yeah, and that's where the 4 notable cases that are tied to LA County, and particularly the 3 on JPL. I mean, that to me was a little bit more significant, but at the same time, yeah, it matters to say, okay, we're looking into this, but whether or not they're actually related, remains to be a question. But, President Trump has come out very recently, just in the last few months, and saying that he's going to declassify all of the information related to UFOs and aliens. And we've kind of, gotten off of that with everything going on with Iran. And, everybody isn't exactly, I think, expecting that anytime soon, as we've seen the promise of the release of the Epstein files and how quickly that hasn't happened. But, the fascination, I think, with, some of this work and particularly the fact that President Trump is focused on that. These aren't just people that have, a similar background. I mean, these are people that have very high level security clearances. And so that's, I think, why this is getting more national attention, because that seems to be odd.
It does seem to be odd, and the high security clearances, look, we know, and this has been widely reported over the years, that there are active Chinese and Russian efforts within the United States to obtain intelligence, that reports that Chinese companies or individuals buy property near sensitive government facilities in an apparent attempt to intercept communications or to spy on those facilities. This level of espionage is nothing new, and foreign countries have gotten very good at trying to discern our secrets by targeting high security clearance individuals and seeing what information they can glean from them. Hacking is a very popular method. So this really does raise the stakes for our national security, and maybe this is the story that finally gets more attention on what foreign operatives are doing in the United States.
Yeah, and that's certainly a concern. And that in and of itself, the national security side, may be what has triggered the FBI involvement in cases that at least individually might just look like local missing persons or unexplained deaths. I mean, this is typically handled by the state and local level. So at what point does a pattern, either real or perceived, when you're dealing with people with access to this type of sensitive information, justify federal jurisdiction or this opening of an investigation that the president announced on Thursday?
Well, part of it is exactly the national security concerns. Part of it is when you're working on government agency projects that are sensitive, and it's the FBI that is best positioned to investigate because they have agents with clearance to actually know what these people are working on. That always becomes an issue. But there's also the interstate component, because this is not just something happening in one location. When you have any type of correlation even that crosses state lines, you do get interest from the federal government because it may implicate federal crimes.
Yeah. And so this is it's really interesting. And I think the congressman, who went on Fox last week and is suggesting in his own words that this is almost the fate of these scientists is almost certainly linked to their access to classified information. He may have information about the investigation that we're not aware of and that he's not necessarily sharing. But if that's just pure speculation, that may be jumping the gun a little bit.
It may be, and it's also, I think, we need to actually follow the news and follow the story and see where the facts go before we jump to those conclusions. Because, again, while it may certainly be the case that there was some project or some work or some sense of connected enterprise that these people shared, we don't really know that yet. What we do know is that these are scientists. They're the brain trust, essentially, behind a lot of our more sensitive workings in biochemistry and chemical teams in nuclear components. But again, statistically speaking, these deaths or these disappearances are not by themselves unusual. So we really do need to wait and see what these people were working on and whether it connects to their work.
Yeah, and speaking of things that aren't that unusual, but the headlines always turn us to the propaganda or the way that the outlets would prefer us to read this. There's been a lot going on in the Charlie Kirk investigation and the upcoming trial of the alleged assassin with the ATF report and the ballistics report. And when this first dropped, Gerard, and I know that you've seen these headlines as well, that the bullet that was found didn't match or didn't necessarily match the gun that the alleged killer had. That wasn't necessarily something that was inexplicable or even something out of the ordinary. And so when the judge unsealed the ATF report last week in this case, prosecutors alleged, this is coming from Fox News, that DNA consistent with the suspect was found on the gun, towel, and 3 of the 4 rounds inside it. And so prosecutors have alleged that separate testing found DNA consistent on, all of those things. And so the report's conclusions had already been made to the public prior to the court proceedings. But, this is a case, I think, where a lot of people are jumping to conclusions right away instead of looking at actually the facts in the case. And, this may or may not sway the judge's opinion on whether or not the case itself, when there is a trial, will be live streamed to the public. And I think that it should, because we need kind of real-time pushback and commentary on some of these things, especially for those that are predisposed to suggest that, this is a setup of Tyler Robinson, of the alleged assassin, rather than looking at where the facts lead, like you just said.
So you're absolutely right that this should be broadcast live. I think this is perhaps one of the most consequential murder trials that we've seen in the last 20 years. And it's something of national importance where we already have conspiracy theories claiming everything under the sun with this case, but we don't want to have that bias of people who don't know what they're talking about, just trying to pursue these theories at the expense of the facts and at the expense of Erica Kirk. And I think that what we saw with this weapons report, when the ATF says that they could not conclusively match a bullet fragment, that doesn't mean the gun was not fired in that gun. There are a lot of factors that go into that: the type of bullet, the type of casing, how the bullet penetrated its target, what it hit after it penetrated the target. So that there are many valid scientific reasons behind what goes on. And even then, the ATF did confirm that there was a match between the bullet fragment and the spent casing. So when you look at the reports and when you break them down with people who understand the science, it becomes less subject to conspiratorial beliefs, and people can have a better understanding of what's actually going on, versus what they read on the internet.
Yeah, people who actually know what's going on. That's the key, because unfortunately in this whole online culture where you have, voices that can publish to the masses without any sort of gatekeeping or any sort of publishing, while that's good in some sense, it also can be very damaging when you have people that are just out there giving conspiracy theories or opinions on things they absolutely don't know about. I mean, this is why I like to invite people who are subject matter experts on things that I don't know, because you can't be a subject matter expert on everything, so that they can come on and give an informed opinion and also facts based on their expertise. And we should always do our due diligence and not just believe, some of the speculation, because maybe that opinion tends to favor our own confirmation bias. So it's going to be very interesting how this case proceeds, but we need to go where the facts and evidence lead, and that's where the prosecutors are going. But Gerard Filitti, we got to take a break here. Really appreciate your commentary, and as always, you can follow him on X at Gerard Filitti, and also the Lawfare Project, very important work that they do. And we will be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
This is Abraham Hamilton III with AFR, and we're sending Bibles. Here's Michael with Bible League International.
How do you hide God's Word in your heart if you've never even held it in your hands? We've spent the last few weeks telling you about the incredible need for God's Word in the regions of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America. God is truly at work. Our prayers are being answered. The gospel is taking grip, but as many as 9 of 10 new believers are denied God's Word. And while many are adults, many are just kids wanting to know what it means to grow as new believers.
I am Lisbeth. I am 10 years old and live in Peru with my mom and sisters. My dad died last year. We would like a Bible to read every day when we wake up. Thank you.
AFR listening family, during the month of April, we want to bless 4,000 Bibleless believers around the world, including 10-year-old Elizabeth. So it's $5 a Bible. $100 will bless 20 waiting believers. Abraham?
You can give by calling 800-YES-WORD, 800-YES-WORD, or visit sendbiblesnow.org. That's sendbiblesnow.org.
Okay, here's an assignment for you, if you will. I want you to take some time and think about a getaway that gives you a chance to get together with other people of faith, deepen your walk with God, and make new friends, all while enjoying the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter in Kentucky. I'm talking about joining AFA at the Ark, October 29th and 30th. This is a great opportunity to break away from the grind of everyday life and draw closer to God through special presentations from Patricia Engler and Brian Osborne of Answers in Genesis. It also includes entrance to the Creation Museum on Thursday and the Ark Encounter on Friday. Friday's dinner includes a panel discussion with Tony Vitagliano, Walker Wildman, and Wesley Wildman, Vice Presidents of American Family Association. This is an event that can fill up quickly, so hurry to afa.net/events to register for AFA at the Ark 2026. afa.net/events, and we'll see you at the Ark.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. From Watertown, New York, a controversy over a middle school art class. Kids at Case Middle School exposed to what parents say is pornography. The art teacher on administrative leave as a result. Local TV reports indicate the kids were exposed to very graphic artwork from an activist known for his social activism on issues like AIDS. So you can only imagine what sort of debauchery the kids were forced to observe. Trust me when I tell you the image is far too graphic to describe on the radio. Now, many parents filed complaints arguing the teacher committed a criminal act. The American Center for Law and Justice is representing two of the parents. They say the teacher told the kids in advance the images were inappropriate, but said they should just be mature. ACLJ says the school district failed in its responsibility to protect the children. Not only that, the kids were traumatized. They saw what they saw, and you can't unring that bell. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. And finally, there is some widespread national outrage over the definition of family, of marriage, of parentage, and over the legalities of things like surrogacy and homosexual couples being able to adopt children, because obviously in the context of two men or two women, they cannot independently, according to natural law, procreate. So there has to be some type of child commodification and ultimately a purchase of a child in order to manufacture the desires of those individuals to become parents when they cannot, under any circumstances, naturally. And this happened because there was a viral video that went, and it's utterly tragic. And I feel so bad for this little 6-month-old boy who has been placed with two men. And apparently these are men who are somewhat well known. They are, one of them at least, is a pretty famous singer or songwriter in Nashville. And they posted this video of the child kind of crying, and then one of them saying, do you want Papa or Dada? And the child says, Mama. And they kind of laugh at him and say, there is no Mama. And then the child starts crying. And the national outrage, as this clip has been shared, has finally, I think, brought up some questions about the morality and lack thereof of surrogacy, of renting out a woman's womb, of commodification of children, and the manipulation and the attempted redefinition outside of natural law of what it means to be a family. And so there has been no better voice in the last few years, especially as she's risen more to prominence, than Katy Faust, who has a wonderful book titled Them Before Us, who's talking about the rights of the child and not the preferences and the desires of the adults. And so Katy joins me now. And Katy, you had a really great thread on X. I'd encourage everyone to follow Katy at Katy Faust on X, talking about how the lie of the Obergefell versus Hodges decision, the same-sex marriage decision, marriage, quote unquote, the big lie was that this decision and encompassing, quote unquote, marriage as the union of two same-sex individuals would only affect those two individuals. And we are seeing how that lie is coming to fruition when we look at all of the children that this decision is affecting.
Yeah, that's right. Gay marriage was never just about what happens in the privacy of your bedroom. When you're redefining something as fundamental as marriage, it's going to have ripple effects. And I'll tell you, the rings in that closest throw of that redefinition stone is children. Marriage and children go together. The very reason why the government acknowledges marriage and recognizes marriage is because it has an interest in children. It has an interest in the next generation. Marriage and parenthood laws are tightly linked. And so we predicted, and now we've got 11 years of receipts, that when you redefine marriage, when you make husbands and wives optional in marriage, you make mothers and fathers optional in parenthood law. And that's exactly what we've seen. So we've got this outrage, rightful outrage, about this baby who's articulating one of the most primal needs, mama, and being mocked and laughed at by the two men who ordered and commodified and purchased him. Why were we all incensed and enraged? Because I think for the first time, a lot of people put together, wait a second, this is not just love makes a family. This is child commodification and mother deprivation makes a family, and we're going to laugh at the child whose very real needs are being denied on camera for everybody to see. So it's awful. It's absolutely awful. But you know what? This has been going on legally under the gay marriage regime for almost 11 years, happening everywhere that commercial surrogacy has been legalized. And very few people have taken note. Most people look at these kinds of situations and say, well, all I see is two loving parents, or biology doesn't matter. Love makes a family. Or, they say, well, why can't two fathers are better than none? And now people are going, you know what? Forget that. Kids need a mother. And I don't care how many people get angry at me for saying it.
Mm-hmm. And finally, I think people are waking up to the horrific reality of the redefinition of marriage and family and the consequences that this actually propagates. And you also mention in your thread pretty prominently, for example, the former Democrat who's now apparently a conservative, at least in some respects, but not consistently, Dave Rubin. And for those who don't know him, he's a pretty well-known podcaster. He was a Democrat, kind of part of that whole walking away from Hillary Clinton and kind of seeing all of that. But he is very openly homosexual. He is with a man, and they did the same thing where they went through surrogacy and basically purchased a pair of twins. And at the time that he posted this picture with his partner and the ultrasound photos and said, coming soon, baby 1 and baby 2, the conservative overall, a lot of conservatives who hadn't quite caught on to the tragedy of this were actually congratulating him. And one of the more prominent voices that I personally was very disappointed in was Governor DeSantis, who, because Dave Rubin's in Florida, like me, who's a Florida host, DeSantis goes on Dave Rubin's show quite frequently. And so, they know each other well, like the governor and I do. And so, he congratulated him. And that to me was a moment of total inconsistency of the conservative and also the Christian worldview for a lot of people who have not understood that being a conservative and a Christian, first and foremost, is to be consistent with natural law, with morality, and with the effects, regardless of whether it's a conservative, one of the people who's supposedly on our side or not. And I think there's finally some backlash against the prominent, and not just DeSantis. There were a lot of people who congratulated Dave Rubin and saying, well, wait a minute, maybe we need to rethink this.
I agree. And I see a lot of those voices getting quieter now with every increasing pregnancy announcement. There were some for Guy Benson, but not as much. But now we've seen, pedophiles acquire children through surrogacy. And now we see babies crying on camera about it. Now we see single men and triple men that, love makes their family too. And I think a lot of conservatives are going, well, okay, I'm actually uncomfortable with this, and rightly so. And obviously, some of them are even thankfully going farther upstream and saying, I don't know if this is happening in isolation. I actually think gay marriage caused this. And they're exactly right. Because if gay couples are going to be afforded the same quote-unquote constellation of benefits as Justice Kennedy outlined, some of those benefits of marriage are children. And so we've seen a rewrite of our parentage laws over the last 11 years away from children come from a man and woman and deserve to be raised by that man and woman towards now we have to distribute children. Parenthood used to be something that we recognized. The child obviously came from this man and this woman, and the government did not interfere and didn't necessarily decide who was and was not a parent. But now the government is, just like they did with the transgender movement, assigning sex. Now the government's assigning parents because equality and all of that. And so I think a lot of people are saying, I went along with gay marriage because I love my gay friends. And all of us love our gay friends. And they said, well, the gay movement has told me this is the only way that I can love my gay friends. And if I don't support gay marriage, I obviously don't love my gay friends. And now there's a lot of people that are saying, you know what? I want children to have a mother and father. And even if it means that some of my gay friends might get angry at me, I'm okay with that. Because kids need a mother and father. And I guess I would rather have a little bit of discomfort between me and my lesbian niece or my gay neighbors if it means that I am not complicit in validating the manufacturing of intentionally motherless kids. That's okay with me. So this is the right course of thinking. You cannot say, I support gay marriage and say children need a mother and father, because those two things don't go together. It doesn't go together in the moral universe, and it doesn't go together in the legal universe. You can have one or the other. Either kids have a right to their mother and father, and therefore the government recognizes the natural procreative union that makes those babies. You can support gay marriage, and you're going to get gay men laughing at babies that are saying mama and saying, I'm sorry, kid, you don't have one.
Yeah, and I think that we are seeing the tide finally turning, and people are recognizing the lie that we talked about, that it isn't just between, the two homosexuals, and there's no other, victims. Well, who does it hurt? What does it matter to you? I mean, we've all heard all of those excuses, like, why do you care what goes on in the bedroom? Why do you care, whether two people say that they're married or not? And one of the pushbacks now that I'm seeing on social media and other places, Katy, is this question, well, you say that marriage is between one man and one woman, but where does it say that? And obviously they want us to respond, well, the Bible clearly defines marriage as one man and one woman, so that they can say, well, I don't believe in the Bible, and, well, the Constitution doesn't claim God, and, all of those other arguments to then make it into a religious argument, instead of simply one of natural law, that a child cannot come to exist without one man and one woman. And so natural law, the very reality to which we're presented, provides the definition of marriage.
Yeah, it's so funny because I had this guy, on my ex thread last night. So marriage is about, children being with their mother and father. I have 3 different couples in my immediate family that don't have any kids. I'm like, how many people in your immediate family didn't come from a mother and father? That's my question. Mm-hmm. This is not actually about the adults. Take the focus off the adults. Begin with the child. Where do they come from? What do those 2 adults, that one man and woman, what do they do for the child that nobody else does? Well, they give them maternal and paternal love. Fantastic. They also ground them, their biological identity, and anchor them to a kinship network that stabilizes their identity consolidation. Awesome. They also happen to be statistically the most connected to, invested in, and protective of the child. And whenever there's an unrelated adult that's raising them, risk of abuse and neglect rise. So those are the non-negotiables that are going to be true about the human child, regardless of what 5 Supreme Court justices say. And children are sad. They're sad when their mother and father has left them or sold them. And that's what we got to see in the video. And so this is, awful for the child, but fantastic for people touching grass and hopefully getting back to the place where we correct this terrible injustice we've inflicted on children. I'm spearheading a national campaign. You are in it. AFA is in it, called the Greater Than campaign, greaterthan.com, where we're going to retake marriage. Like, gay couples can't have it. It belongs to kids. Children should not be denied their mother and father in the name of adult equality. So we are going to do something about it, and it is going to work. And I'm glad that people are finally seeing with their own eyes the injustice that misnaming marriage has wrought on children.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful and thankful that you have been such a prominent voice on this issue, and that there is now a groundswell of national outrage that I hope that we can capitalize on in the states and also nationally to kind of turn things back, because this, of course, started not just with the sexual revolution, but, even like when I was a kid, growing up in the 90s, you watched shows like Friends, for example, that, said, well, who needs our siblings and all that, our roommates and our friends, well, that's our family. And so there was sort of this perception in the propaganda that often comes through the world of Hollywood, right? The worldview that says you can create a family out of your own choices and the people that you select, not necessarily the people you're related to. And even among, Gen Z, this is a big thing, like, hey fam, and everybody, and people use that term just very loosely to mean just, whoever I select and prefer. And we are, I think, slowly, hopefully, getting back to the real common sense and natural definitions of what it actually means to be a family, and that it's rooted in biology and natural law, not just preferences. And so, do you think that because of the kind of this groundswell of the grassroots, that the movement is really starting, and like we saw the overturning of Roe versus Wade, that within the next, hopefully few years, we could actually see the overturning of Obergefell and kind of righting this terrible ship?
Yes, absolutely. Nature finds a way. That's the bottom line. Like, you can drive it out with a pitchfork, but it's going to come roaring back. We saw it with abortion. We're going to see it in gay marriage too. I don't know how long it's going to take with gay marriage, but as long as we keep speaking the truth, there's no way to avoid this. I mean, the evidence is going to be all around us. A lot of these kids that were made intentionally motherless or fatherless in the name of non-discrimination, they grow up and they're going to say, why did you do this to me? Why was it that I had to lose my father in the name of a new civil right? There aren't any other civil rights like that. I mean, abortion, I guess, civil right to abortion, children lost their life. And we recognize, actually, that's not a constitutional right. So children should not have to be harmed or denied somebody to whom they have a natural right, so that adults can, be in line with the Constitution. So what do we need to do? We need to drive home the fact that children are the primary victims when we redefine marriage. It's not adults who are sad. It's not even religious adults who's, have to sign a marriage document that they don't want to sign or arrange flowers they don't want to arrange. The primary victims of gay marriage are children, because it makes their mother or father legally optional in their life, and that harms them. So there is a groundswell, and I think that people are having their eyes opened, and they are waking up. But it's our job to make the case, not just to the culture, but to the courts. So we do have a judicial strategy for the Greater Than campaign, where we are going to force them to make those decisions. We are not going to be asking them, do same-sex couples have dignity, and are they second-class citizens? We're not asking that. They are absolutely 100% made in the image of God and just as worthy of love and protection as anyone else. We're going to be asking the courts, do children benefit from their own mother and father, or is a state-assigned stranger just as good? That's what we're going to be asking them. And I think that when people and justices are positioned with that question, we're going to get a very, very different answer than we did in 2015.
I hope so. And so if you want to get involved, go to greaterthancampaign.com. That's greaterthancampaign.com. Be praying for this. And it's great that the eyes of the nation are being opened to the atrocities of what has happened since the Obergefell versus Hodges decision, and how we have no authority in our own human capacity to redefine the laws of nature that nature's God has imposed. So Katy Faust, really appreciate it. Again, follow her on X. You'll see a lot of really great commentary from her that you can use in responding to people who make these kinds of arguments. So we'll be right back with more.
American Family Radio is now available on iOS and Apple TV apps. That means even our content is in the world, but not of the world.
Here's where both of you, or each of you, got it right and wrong according to Scripture. That's always our plumb line.
And you can download these apps free from your favorite app store.
The objective is to make disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ.
AFR, available on iOS and Apple TV. And you can find even more app options at afr.net/apps.
Join American Family Radio for Faith and Finance with Rob West.
As we think about the opportunity we have to steward God's resources, we realize that it's a high calling. It's an important responsibility, and our goal in that is simply faithfulness.
Rob brings biblical insight to a variety of financial topics. He's joined by special guests and experts in the field of finances. Faith and Finance with Rob West. Weekday mornings at 9 Central. Find the podcast at afr.net.
How about this? Some actual good news on the healthcare front, even as costs just keep skyrocketing. So if you're 65 or older, MediShare now offers MediShare 65 Plus. Call them. You can talk to them about this. A lot of people are taking advantage of this now because even if you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are out-of-pocket things, deductibles and copays that just keep going up. And the whole point is to help you by giving you a low, consistent monthly payment that fills in the gaps. In fact, I can tell you how much MediShare 65 Plus is. For example, it's $99 a month up to age 75. It keeps costs under control. That helps with peace of mind. MediShare is trusted, too. It's been around for 30 years, and it's a community of people who help each other. Business owners, retirees, pastors, teachers. People love being part of it. Here's the number you can call now. They are easy to talk to. Call 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE.
The following is a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt, and it stressed me out. But what I thought was a solution turned out to be a problem. I kept hearing ads about debt settlement that seemed too good to be true. And actually, it was. When I called, they told me to stop paying my bills. That didn't sound right to me at all, so I hung up. Later, I found out that debt settlement is bad, real bad. Then I learned that there is a right way to pay off your credit cards. It's called a debt management program from the great team at Trinity. Trinity had a plan. In the end, I paid off my bills, I saved thousands, and I even improved my credit score.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Heather. Please forget debt settlement and remember Trinity Debt Management.
1-800-788-1813.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, as we're talking about the family and the need for a father and mother and a man and a woman, the question of where are the men and what happened to masculinity is being addressed in a new book from our friend Raw Egg Nationalist, who's Dr. Charles Cornish Dale, that is titled The Last Men, Liberalism and the Death of Masculinity. And this is a really important topic, I think, and even just in the context, I was actually, laughing because I didn't want to cry about another headline that I saw recently. There's a new FX limited series called Love Story, which is about John F. Kennedy Jr.'s life. And apparently the producers had difficulty finding a modern actor with what they called old school 1980s style masculinity. Basically, they had trouble finding a man. Like, it's so sad that you have to ask yourself, what happened to masculinity? And I see Instagram reels all the time that are so true. In fact, like my girlfriends and I send them to each other all the time that, say, here's another man behaving like a little princess, and another man who isn't actually being a man in one way, shape, or form. And the question really is, what happened and what caused the death of masculinity? So Raw Egg Nationalist joins us now, and this is a really important question, like I said, and how do you answer this in the book?
You, Jenna. Yeah, this is a huge problem. It's a civilizational problem, actually, as I think we're all starting to realize, you can't have a properly functioning civilization without real men, without men who do the things that men have always traditionally done. And for decades and decades, certainly since the end of the Second World War, but really probably stretching back beyond then, we've seen traditional masculinity demonized, stigmatized, downplayed. We've seen tremendous gains for women over the last 100 years in terms of their formal political rights, their social standing, their cultural power. But a lot of it has been at the expense of men. But that's not the whole story. It's not simply just about the kind of culture that we live in now and social values and the progress of second and third wave feminism. There's also a serious biological crisis taking place. And that's really the central thing that I look at in this new book, The Last Men, Liberalism and the Death of Masculinity, testosterone decline in particular. So testosterone is the master male hormone. It is the hormone that makes men men rather than women. Men and women both have testosterone, but men have much, much more than women, in the same way that women have much, much more estrogen than men. And scientific studies show that over recent decades, there has been a 1% year-on-year decline in testosterone levels among men across the West, in the US, in Europe, in Israel, in other countries, and it looks like actually in the developing world as well. And so, as a counterpart to this social decline, the kind of marginalization of masculinity, there's also this biological change, this profound biological change that's happening. And it's happening for all sorts of reasons that RFK Jr. actually is trying to address with the Maha agenda. Things like unhealthy lifestyles, obesity, sedentary lifestyles, lack of exercise, but also pervasive exposure to harmful chemicals, especially a class of chemicals called endocrine disruptors, which disrupt the body's natural balance of testosterone and estrogen with a wide variety of harmful effects. They drive obesity, metabolic changes, behavioral changes, fertility changes, and also changes to levels of testosterone. And so that's driving this sort of masculine decline as well. It's social, it's also biological.
Yeah, and it's so sad that we're seeing such dramatic effects. I mean, I think it's even been a dramatic change even in my lifetime. I mean, I can remember, again, being a kid in the 90s, because I was born in 1984, so kind of coming of age late 80s, early 90s. Men were still men, and there were still a cultural understanding of, the need of the family and moral values and all of this. And yet, we fast forward only, 20, 30 years later, and we see the rise of the effeminate man. And it's shocking to me that men themselves would allow this to happen. I mean, what shifted culturally beyond the chemicals and the science and all of this that obviously contributed to this significantly? There also is a worldview and kind of a mindset shift when men don't care about being fathers anymore. They don't care about being husbands. They don't care about being protectors. And obviously not all. I mean, hopefully Christian men still care about that. But even within the church, we're not seeing the overall standard of masculinity and the things that used to entail And so what happened in terms of this overall mindset shift that men were okay just disregarding their own masculinity?
Yeah, I think it's a complicated story, Jenna. I mean, there are a lot of things going on. I mean, if we just look at fertility, then of course, fertility rates throughout the West have been in precipitous decline for decades, and we could draw parallels with other societies throughout history. You could draw parallels with the Roman Empire. You could talk about the kind of collapse of fertility that took place during the Roman Empire, largely as a result of prosperity, and say, maybe it's economic prosperity that perhaps stops people from having children. Maybe, we're too prosperous, we're too comfortable. People find fulfillment in their lives simply through material goods and comfort rather than, going out and seeking more meaningful existence. So I think there's that, but I think also, I mean, we are subject to a very, very virulent strain of feminism, I think, which by asserting that women are totally equal with men in every single facet, not just mentally, morally, but also physically, then we've really, erased the differences between men and women. And so not only is it the case that actually now, fatherhood is disparaged, but also motherhood is disparaged as well. They're two sides of the same coin, and I think we've moved away from a sense that there are fundamental differences that should be preserved and upheld between the two sexes, which don't necessarily mean that they're unequal. You can afford men and women equal protection in front of the law. You can afford them equal value within society. But you don't have to go that further step and say, actually, you know what? There aren't any differences at all between men and women. The differences we see between men and women, they're just arbitrary constructs. They're just constructs of power, and they've just been used throughout history to oppress women at the expense of men, which obviously is true to some extent in certain ways, but it's certainly not an absolute truth. And so I think, it definitely is a cultural and ideological problem as well as a biological one. It's an economic problem too, of course, because, you've had women entering the workforce since the end of the Second World War. And that's done all sorts of interesting things to wages. It's much harder now for a man to support a family on a single wage. That used to be normal. A man could buy a home or certainly rent a home and support a family on a single wage. That's not possible now. So the priorities have shifted economically, culturally, morally, and then you've got this biological problem underneath as well. It's a really nasty, knotty situation that we've got ourselves into, I think.
You're so right, too, that as the mindset and the priority shift of what the goals are in life, and the goals have certainly shifted, and the priorities for people who are wanting to prioritize physical comfort, pleasure, status, things that ultimately are self-driven, rather than creating a life of service and of others and of contributing to something greater than themselves. And when these priorities shift, we start seeing, the people who are okay completely just being single, or they choose a relationship without children, or they choose some of these other arrangements like being in a homosexual relationship that doesn't allow for natural children because of their own personal preferences, instead of recognizing the morality that is implicit in the natural order of things. And this includes, of course, the distinctions you were talking about, Raw Egg, of the differences between men and women. And society now for decades has been sold this lie, not just of the sexual revolution and to seek pleasure and all of those things, but to redefine family, masculinity, femininity, all of those things on a relativistic scale, and do whatever makes you happy, affirm whatever pleasure you're seeking. Your life goal is just as valid as someone else's. And in the process, we're losing the understanding of what genuinely gives life meaning. And of course, first and foremost, that is coming into a saving knowledge of Christ and our relationship with Christ, but then living within the context of the ordered life that God created us to be fulfilled in. And so, we're seeing massive depression, anxiety, mental health problems, and so much that, is attributable a lot to, some of these chemicals and other things, that are problems with the food system, but also with our worldview, because none of this is making anybody genuinely happier or actually more fulfilled. They end up getting all of the status, money, relationships, pleasure, whatever, and they realize that it's all empty. And then at that point, they become despondent. And we're seeing such a rise of dependency on big pharma because of that. And so it seems like there's no incentive really for our system, whether in America or Europe or, anywhere in the West, to correct this. I think it has to come from we, the people ourselves, recognizing that this isn't a good way to live.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jenna. I think that there are entrenched interests and incentives within the system to perpetuate all of this. Look, women going out to work in large numbers has benefited big business. There's no question about that. It's kept wages down because all of a sudden, you have effectively doubled the labor pool. And then you've got big pharma, like you say, rather than actually sorting out the underlying problems. Why are we actually this depressed? Why are we this fat? Why are we despondent? Why don't we have any sense of purpose? Oh, well, let's just give you a drug for that. And then, of course, there are side effects from that drug, and so we'll give you another drug to deal with the side effects. And you end up at a point where actually, a significant number of people within society are not only medicated the whole time, they're taking multiple medications. They're taking 5 or more medications, which is known as polypharmacy. So there are all of these entrenched interests that I think are working against a really meaningful change that could actually do something to address these fundamental problems. We have Maha, and I think that RFK Jr. is someone who understands the difference between ad hoc, like big pharma, non-solutions and real solutions that address the underlying fundamental problems. He understands that we can't have more big pharma. We need to change the way people eat. We need to get people outside in the sun. We need to get them to exercise, etc. But he's taking on the biggest entrenched interests in the US: big pharma, big ag, big chemical. It's not gonna be easy. We are really at a point where actually we basically need something approaching a revolution actually in order to put us back on the right course. We can't just have sticking plasters at this point.
Yeah. And do you think that, and we're almost out of time here, we need to do a longer segment on this, but do you think that the young men, at least of Gen Z, are recognizing this? I see a lot of them stepping up and saying, okay, I want to return to masculinity, not just traditional masculinity, but actually the definition of what it means to be a man.
Yes, I do. I think there is. And you see it on social media all the time. Certainly, I've got a huge following on Twitter. And that's because of my message, I think. But you see it on TikTok, you see it on Instagram, young men going out, getting fit, trying to improve their lives, trying to make themselves better. And that's something that should absolutely be encouraged. And I do my best. I really do my best to try and get young men to make a meaningful change.
So let us know where you can find your book. I guess it's on Amazon to pre-order. It's called The Last Men, Liberalism and the Death of Masculinity.
Yes, it's out now, Jenna. You can get it in hardcover, Kindle, and audiobook formats from Amazon.
Fantastic. So it's called The Last Men by Dr. Charles Cornish Dale. You can follow him on X as well. And so you can get that now on Amazon. And I'd encourage you to read it and think about the propositions here that we're talking about, because this matters to culture, to civilization, and ultimately to the order that God has established in nature, the laws of nature and of nature's God. So thanks so much, Raw Egg. And as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.